Hi everyone, so this is already day 15, population and the environment. After this lecture, we have one more day to go. For the final exam. So all the final exam questions will be drawn from the textbook or the 16 chapters of the textbook. So I will have one review session, but I will just cover on the contents I covered in the lecture and the textbook. So after today, you will have one more day of the textbook and the regular lecture. So day 15. The population and environment issues. So there are the key issues in this chapter because we are talking about the population and the environmental issues in the US. We can see some natural and artificial resources are limited because if we have some continuous population growth, we may encounter some problems of the shortages of the resources. Maybe we can look through the environmental and population problems intertwined with each other because population problem can cause the environmental problem and also the environmental problem cause the population problems. And we can also check the possible solutions about those issues. And because these are greatly huge topics, so population and the environment are two wide and big topics, so I will try my best to limit our scope into the problems in the US, not the global perspective. So sociological theories. The functionalism talk about the population growth is very normal and inevitable, and this is like a bit, they have the various components as the essential process for any society. So if we don't have some population growth in any nation or in any society, we cannot maintain the society because if we have more dying people than the births, we may have some declines of the population. The decline of the population means losing the workforces and losing the tax basis and losing the power because the number of individuals may be a component of the power of the country. Anyway, another point, pollution and the environmental problems are inevitable because we are living in some cities or we are living in the society. The population growth may result in sorry about that. Go away. So result in some possible population or pollution or the environmental problems. But if we have too severe degree of the problems, I mean too severe air pollution or waste issues in the cities, these are dysfunctional, may reduce the stability of the cities or the society. Too rapid population growth would be very dysfunctional because it may not meet the needs of the society, and the crowding and the consuming the limited sources like limited coals or limited gas will be resulting in the bad or negative results. So certainly the population growth would be very valuable to create or to maintain the society. However, too high death rate or too high decline level will result in the negative consequences as a dysfunctional consequences. So both too rapid population growth and decline will cause the big problems. So in the functionalism, some certain level or appropriate level of the population growth is considered as the ideal process. So functionalism, see population and environment are mutually closely related. So population growth leads to some degree of environmental issues, and then industrialized countries need to have enough young workers to replace a certain number of the retired people. So population growth may be an essential part of the development of the society, but too much or the little population growth are quite serious problems because it means it's kind of losing the population, losing the population. But the population growth level is ideal optimum. So we don't know what will be the optimal level or the ideal level of the population growth. So it depends on the economic level or development level of each country. So for example, for the US, we maintain about like 2.1 as the total fertility level. So average women are likely to have like 2.1, more than a little bit more than 2 children in her life period. So this is kind of very stable and very good level of the population growth level, because like 2 people meet together and generally bear the 2 children, so we can maintain the population level with the good population level. But if we have the fertility level such as like a 6 or 7, we would have some high population level. So if the country or society is very poor and lack of the resources, maybe having the 6 or 7 or even the 2 will not be too high. So depends on the development level, the optimal level or ideal level of the growth of the population will be determined. In the complete theory, they don't consider population growth is a serious problem, because they think that the Earth has enough resources to meet the needs of the population growth. But they think that the absolute quantity of the food or resources are not a problem, but the distribution, I mean unequal distribution between some wealthier or wealthy countries and poor countries will be more problematic. So in the complete theory, the distribution is a bigger or more serious matter than the scarcity of the food or resources. So at the same time, complete theory also recognizes the problems of the high population growth. So by failure of the policies or low education and labor force participation of women, they expect to have the higher fertility level or higher population growth level. So they favor, so in that meaning they are blaming some population policies or some lack of education and labor force participation usually declines the fertility level. Also, complete theory favors loosening restriction on the migration into the U.S., even for the undocumented immigrants, which are very controversial. And world environment problems are not inevitable, but raised from the practices of the multinational corporations and failure of the regulations. So they think that the distribution of the resources are very problematic, and even they allow some loosen or the weaker regulation for the immigrations, and ironically or some in contrast, they think they should the US and the countries of the developed countries need to have some stronger regulations about the some pollution level or environmental safeguard or environment protections. In the symbolic interactionism, they do weigh on the interactions of the social agent, individuals, and the population and the environmental problems. So they seek to understand why people engage or do not engage the activities affecting the population growth or decline or environmental issues. So the example is a contraceptive use parent. So if they are not likely to use the contraceptive use, maybe they think or they research about the parents or what are the social background affecting the frequency of the usage of the contraceptive use methods. Also, they seek to analyze the people's perceptions about the problems as the root of the perceptions. So in our first chapter, you may remember or might not remember, the perception level is the main issue of the social problems. Even though there is some concrete empirical data, if many people, I mean if the public do not perceive that is the social problem, we may not consider that as the social problem or a serious social problem, because that issue is not publicized or covered by the media a lot. And these are some problems of the some extent of the social constructions, as we mentioned before. So lead problems like on the level of the octane in the blood, there's not a big problem or social issue some decades ago. However, after the discovery of the harmful level of the lead in the blood, especially for the children, The checking the lead or some other materials level is the mandatory process of the moving. So if we move in or move out in the PG County, for example, you need to have some consultation of the lead professional. So the conception or the social constructions usually impact on the when designing or defining the social issues or problems in the environment or population. And also there are the people from the different social and cultural backgrounds can have different understanding on the same types of the problems in the population growth or environmental issues. The population. Population is very big topic as well. So population changes, meaning that like immigration or migration or mortality, fertility, and every kind of the social issues changing the population or number of the population in the society. So population changes result in so many important impacts on each society. If we have a high growth or high decline level, it may result in the negative consequences if they are too high or too low. If they are very rapid or too slow, maybe they are very serious, because if we have too high or too rapid population growth rate, we may not be able to meet the requirements or the needs of the large amount of the people. And also if we have the too steep the declining trend of the population, we may lose the basis of the taxes and maybe some funding for the public expenditures, such as the Medicaid or Medicare, or all kind of the governmental policies or expenditure will be in danger, because losing many people may mean losing the workforces and taxpayers. So too rapid or too slow population changes are both equally very dangerous and very serious. Within the U.S., very steep decline of the population in the Michigan, such as Detroit and other cities in the Michigan, because of the declines of the manufacturer factories or manufacturer markets, resulted in the losing of the population of the Michigan. So there were several social problems such as bankruptcies or the closing schools, and other like social infrastructure were weakened. So lack of tax bases and losing skilled workers are resulting in like a chain effect, like losing the population, resulting in many empty houses, and it may depress the market of the real estates, and then they have some like a smaller market because they don't have the many people, and then they have some like a low tax basis. So it's kind of the vicious circle, and then circulating the problems each other and each other again. And then some larger cities are, in contrast, becoming larger and larger. So yesterday we saw that like crowding city as New York and Los Angeles, they have like increasing trends of the population. So it kind of leading more crowded and strained areas in those cities. Relatively small spaces compared with the other urban area and other rural areas or other state areas. So demography is the academic area, studies about the population, studies about the fertility, birth rate, mortality, and the death rate, and migration, which are the components of the population changes. Fertility is the starting point of the population changes. Fertility is the number of the live births. So you can measure the fertility like three major ways. So crude birth rate means number of the live births per every 1,000 people in the given year. So because this is the number or rate per 1,000 people in that area, it's not a big consideration how many women we have in the society. So the sex ratio, the ratio between the number of women by the men, is not a big consideration in the crude birth rate. In the general birth rate, like GFR, this is the number of live births per 1,000 childbearing age women, where they are 15 through 44 years old. So because we account the childbearing age and the gender, we can see that this is like a general level of the fertility. I mean the number of the live births per 1,000 women who are in the active reproduction age. So TFR, which is the total fertility rate, is the number of children that an average woman is expected to have in her lifetime. So among those three measurements, we see that TFR, total fertility rate, is more often used or cited in the media or the academic articles because this is more understandable compared with the earlier measures. So these are like a comparison. So the graph on the left hand side is the general fertility rates, which are like a number of live births from 1,000 childbearing age women. So in this trend, you can see the general decline, even though there are some like a big fluctuations. You can see the general decline level reached to the 65 through 70. So we can see about 65 or 70 live births in 2010 for 1,000 childbearing age women. So it's a little bit tricky to cite or explain in the short sentences. However, if you see the total fertility rate, you can see that it was about 2 around the 97 on the early 19th century, and it reached about a little bit less than 2, but it increased a little bit. So in these days, in 2018, it's about 2.1, but anyway, you can see it's around 2. So, or 1.9 in 2015. So total fertility rate is about 1.9, which means that an average woman in the US is expected to have about 1.9 children in her lifetime. So most children, most women will have or reproduce 2 children in her lifetime. So we can see that TFR is easier or more understandable way or the measure of the fertility. Mortality is kind of the ending point of the life and the population change. So this is the number of deaths in the society, and crude death rates is number of deaths per 1,000 people in that year. So it doesn't take account of the age distribution. So if inevitably, if the society, or let's suppose that there is a city with the full of the elderly over than 65 people. So if there are like 1,000 people, if there are 1,000 elderly, that city may have higher death rates compared with very young city with the full of the children in the kindergarten. So it doesn't account the age distribution. So crude death rate is not the ideal type of the measurement of the mortality rate, but the demographers usually use the age adjusted death rate, controlling the impact of the age. Migration is also a component of the population growth. So this is like a movement of the people in or out from the region or the country. So yeah, in the common sense, immigration or immigration is moving into the region, and in-migration rate is number of people moving into the region for every 1,000 people living in that place. And the out-migration rate is number of people moving out of a region for every 1,000 people in that region. So the net migration rate can be calculated like deducting or deducting the out-migration rate from the in-migration rate. In other words, in-migration rate minus out-migration rate will be the net migration rate. So if the net migration rate is less than 0, if it is negative, it means that there are more out-migration people, or the higher out-migration rate. So in that case, that area will face like a decline of the population, because in just like a pure meaning of the migration, because there are more people going out of the region. So both international and the domestic migration will be impacting the society or that region a lot. Population growth and the decline. So fertility and mortality and net migration are the very important components of the population change in terms of the growth and decline. Natural growth rate is the simple difference between the crude birth rate and the crude death rate. And how long does it take? So this is very interesting and this easy calculation. So let's suppose that there is like 100 people. So how long does it take for that society or that group to double the population? So there is a very simple calculation, the equation that divide the number 7 by its population growth rate. So let's suppose that one country, like country A, have the annual population growth rate as the 3%. We can divide 70 by 3, so the result is 23.3. So it takes 23.3 years to double the population size. So B country with the annual growth rate as 7%. So by dividing the 70 by 7, it's like a 10. So it takes 10 years to double the population size. It's very calculation. And I will use this equation for the quiz. So remember it. So we are heading to the the last of this semester. Yeah, and I will provide more hints for the questions in the quiz. Population projection is expected trends of the population growth or decline. We expect the population growth and decline for the several decades in the later by using the projection rate of the fertility and the mortality and the migration trends. We will see the demographic trend in theory, but they assume that the population growth level will be slowed down after later or by the development level. Population growth is concentrated in the poor nations or at higher fertility or death rates internationally, but in the US it doesn't have some a very clear pattern. So there are some various views toward the population growth. So in the early period of the demography, I mean in the 18th century or early 19th century, there were more negative views toward the population growth because they were concerned about the scarcity of the resources, especially for the foods or gas like natural resources. Thomas Malthus is called as a father or mother of the demography or population. He mentioned or argued some theory that population increases is geometrically, so like a 2 or 2 square and 2 square 3 like that. So it increases in the geometrically, not the linear. But the food production increases in the arithmetically, like a linear slope. The general population growth is insisted because they're concerned about the rapid growth that result in very scarcity or too high scarcity of the food or resources. So they want to keep the zero rate or the zero changes the population, just keeping the population level. But the increase rate is slower than expected by the development more effective contraception or the woman's higher labor force participation and education. The production, the technologies of the mass food production resulted in a higher efficiency or higher volume of the food production. So the scarcity level of the food production is less serious than the Malthus and GPA, which is like a zero population growth, scholars expected or concerned. But there are still the various concerns of the overpopulation. If we have too high or too much population in the US, maybe it's like a big burden for the government or the local communities because of the limited budget. Some scholars argue that the world or US resources remain very sufficient, but the unequal distribution is more serious. The demographic transition by the modernization is one another theory of the demographic trends or demographic prediction. So there are 3 stages. Like the first stage which is like underdeveloped area or on like before industrialization. So they have the both birth and death rates very high, and then they have some changes. The birth rate is still very high, but the death rate drops because of the sanitation and the hygiene development or the high technologies and the higher improvement of the medical science or medical skills. And then in the third stage, death rate remains very low because of the development, but because of the contraceptive use and the education increases in the woman, the birth rate drops very rapidly. So because the population growth slows down and down by the development level, we expect to have lower growth rate than we expected in the consensus of the scarcity of the food or resources. So we expect that the poor nations continue to modernize, the population growth rate will be declined a lot. So for another reason is favoring the population growth. So the U.S. has between the concerns about the population growth and also fostering or encourage the mothers to have the babies. So the countries having some a population decline, they usually encourage the people or the mothers to have 2 or more, 3 or more children. So population decline is a very serious problem because low birth rate and the death rate result in the high proportion of the elderly, which means losing the young workers and losing the high skilled workers who have some a fresh education. And the immigration, which is very controversial and a very hot issue in the U.S. So this is very controversial, and the scholars also debate about the positive and negative side of the immigration. So increasing number of the immigrants has affected many aspects of the U.S., both positively and negatively. And despite the origins of the immigrants in the history, people hardly greeted, the citizens usually and hardly greeted the immigrants with open arms from the early prehistory period. So you may learn about the history, U.S. history. So they were Pilgrim, escaped from the Great Britain usually for the freedom of the religion and the freedom of the public or political beliefs. But anyway, and after some centuries, after some decades, there was Catholics or Irish or other Europeans, but they were not greeted or welcomed by the first generation of the immigration. Settled down the North American continent. So historical hostility toward immigrants from the early to the current U.S. history is very persistent and very prevalent. Immigration in the U.S. So I want to check about the recent issues or recent statistics of the immigration. Major debates are centered on the Mexican or Hispanics in the debates of the recent immigrants in the U.S. So there are 33% of the immigrants who are from Mexico. So almost 75% of immigrants are naturalized U.S. citizens or legal residents or legal temporary migrants. So it means that 25% of the new immigrants or the immigrants are illegal residents. So there are also the unauthorized immigrants compose more than 5%. So scholars say that they take some important part of the labor force or market here. So if the U.S. deport how can I say make them move to their own country again by force, the U.S. may lose the labor force and the market or the taxation basis more than we expected. And there are also immigrants, and there are also myths that immigrants, new immigrants or more immigrants, may mean some problems of the crime issues or the criminal problems in that city. But very surprisingly, immigrants versus illegal, they have lower crime rates compared with the non-immigrants at all. So they are the first immigrants who are usually more motivated. So compared with the average, they are even more educated compared with the average of the U.S. citizens, because if they are moving their own country, that means that they are taking some risk of the losing or wasting their time. So they are more likely to be motivated and very entitled with the better education and the norms of the lifestyle. However, yeah, as we may expect, or by the common sense, the immigrants or the immigrant generations, or the second generations, are more likely to have some higher crime rates or the very similar crime rate with the non-immigrants as the Americanized way. So limiting immigration in the U.S. So this is not only limited to the U.S. because some types of the hostility or the limiting the immigration is very natural process to prioritize their own citizens. So this is very natural in one hand. In another hand, there are maybe that kind of the limiting immigration or the method or the ways of limiting immigration could be very harshy or very selective because like we call that like a STEM or H-1B or some types of the special immigration or lottery of the highly educated people like STEM people. Each country or about every country have some selection process, usually favoring the more skilled or highly educated people who will be contributing the US more than the low skilled immigrants. But anyway, this is kind of the natural process of the limiting or the attracting the new immigrants from the worldwide. But it's not deniable that US is kind of very one of the most desired destination of the immigrants from the world. So much of the public is opposed to the immigration, especially for the illegal immigrants. So about like 66% of the people had a negative view or slightly negative view or moderate view toward the illegal immigrants. And more than half of the public favored building a fence, like a 700 miles fence along the border with the Mexico. Yeah, as you know, this is it was surveyed on its data according to the data of 2011. So before the presidency of the President Trump, the U.S. has some like a tendency or the public view as the negatively affecting to the views toward the new immigrants from the Mexico or the Hispanic countries. So many states enforces strict laws regarding the immigrants, especially for the unauthorized or undocumented immigrants, leading them self-deportation by returning their own country. And the detention is like a recent detained children issue. So there was big issue, and I think most of you already realized or heard about that. So there was like a self-detention of the children for their parents. So they were separated to and headed to the like a children detention center. So without like contacting or without allowance with like calling to their parents or contacting or meeting their parents. So fortunately there was canceled the kind of the strong policies are canceled now, but still there are many risky issues in the human resource or human rights on the border between the America and the Mexico. And immigrants and the domestic violence. So in the last chapter, we talked about that the woman in the rural area have some risks of the higher domestic violence because of the like non-enlightenment of the police and the problem of the facilities or some low level of the acceptance of the like reporting on the harshness or the abuses from their husband like that. And immigrant women experience more on domestic violence, or even they cannot report to the police because usually they got some like eternal residence, I mean the green card or their citizenship, because they married the legal or the citizens of the U.S. Because of the fear of the deportation, they even cannot to report or have some counseling for the abuses from their husband. But like for the unauthorized immigrants woman, it's more difficult for the legal immigrants. However, the federal law now allows the abused immigrant woman apply for the legal residency. Environment is not a very close or very tightly closed the issue with the sociology, but there are two very interesting perspectives about the environment in the sociology. This is kind of the environmental sociology, which studies about the interaction between the population, I mean the human behavior, and the natural and the physical environment. So this is very unique perspective because it can provide understanding of the inequality on the impact of the environmental problems such as the disasters like Hurricane Katrina and the communities and the individuals. So they stress on the 2 points as the impact of human activity by the decision of the so like impacts of the humans' decision to the environmental changes. Also the existence consequences of environment inequality and the environmental racism. So it means that for example, the air pollution will be more problematic to the urban residents. I mean, in the poor urban area, they are more likely to have some like African American communities or Hispanic communities, and the suburb area, which has some lower level of air pollution, the counties or the communities will be filled with the higher proportion of the whites or wealthier people. So we can see the lower class people are more likely to be endangered for the population or for the environmental pollution issues. So this is kind of inequality in the environmental racism or environmental inequality. Human activity may impact on the environment or environmental changes, even like cause the disasters. Environments are harmed by the individuals or corporations and our governments, regardless of the like it was intentional or not intentional. So there are many disasters caused by the human activities, such as like a gas tank explosion or oil tanker like explosions, disasters like polluting the water or the oceans and the land. Hurricane Katrina is also kind of the big problem related with the human activities and problems. So you can see the great deal of the preventable damage of the poor people in the world, people of color communities, because of the no understandings of the land usage or something. They were reported to have like higher chances of the flood. However, they didn't make some like big changes. So you can see very clear line distinction. I mean, like it's like a before the Katrina, and this is after the Katrina. So you can see these are like clearly cut down. So you can see that these are like a water. So you can be like a darker color is the water. So you can see the like a flooded area. I mean, affected by the flood is just limited in this area, not across to this street. And this is more clear, like a clearer picture. So by dividing line of this street or this river, you can see so like a left side, which are like a more white residents or area or wealthier area, is hardly attacked by the flood of the water by the Hurricane Katrina. However, this area you can see the more compact or very dense areas. So you can see there are like a very small or like a smaller houses with the like a full of the small houses, which is like a residential crowding, as we mentioned in the previous chapter. You can see it's like a very clearly divided by this line, which is like a dividing the line by the social class and like their race and ethnicity. So because of the different level of the preparedness or some like obstacles or the barriers to the flood or hurricanes like a natural disaster, it resulted in like a different level of the impact of the disaster by their class and by their race. And also environment inequality and racism. So as we covered it before, there is like environment inequality. So it means that low income or lower social class and the poor people or people of color are more likely to be the victims of the environmental disasters or environmental pollution like that. So environmental justice is like trying to reduce the impact of the inequality in the environmental disasters. So almost of all hazardous waste sites and like resources where the dirty sites are located in like poor or near poor area. and these communities are usually filled with the lower class people or the people of color. So there are environmental problems in the US as air pollution, global climate change, and water pollution, nuclear power, and other pollutions in the ground, ocean, and food. And this is very daily issues, but there are big changes we need to do. The possible solutions are a mandatory electricity and natural gas reduction targets for the utilities, and expanding the renewable energy to have some less harms to the environment, and then reduce deforestation and by increasing the sustainable building or the energy saving facilities, and reducing the using the fossil fuels to reduce the level of the air pollutions. So this is the end of our class today. So submit your assignment on time, and we have one more chapter to go. And also I will announce the result of the survey. So anyway, in summary, we are having one day off in the next Wednesday because there were more. So I will announce with the more details about it. But anyway, I'm announcing that we will have one day off on Wednesday, and we will have the review session on this Thursday. But anyway, I will upload my lecture slide already planned for the Wednesday, which is recent changes or recent issues of the population or demography in the US. So for those of you who wanted to maintain the current schedule, you don't need to worry about that because I will upload that lecture material. And you will have the quizzes because we always have the 5 questions per day, but the 5 questions are planned on the Wednesday will be moved to the Thursday. So you will have the 10 quiz questions on Thursday after the review of the all chapters for your final exam. So you will not have some big changes, but having some one day off from the quiz. Because after finishing all the chapters of the textbook, you will not have more daily writing assignments. So today and the next day are some less days of the writing assignments anyway. So anyway, it's very hard to describe in the very short period of time in here, but yeah, I will announce with the more details and let me know if we have more questions. Thank you for your time and see you tomorrow.